Welcome, everyone. Can I get your attention? They said we cannot fill this room, but guess what? It's full. Thank you to the amazing candidates. Can you all hear me well? I am Hajir El Sheikh, chairwoman of Hajir Network. As a Sudanese American who immigrated to the US over 22 years ago to escape dictatorship in Sudan, I have witnessed the destructive consequences of unchecked power. The movie starring Donald Trump and Scott Perry and their counterpart is not new to me. I have watched it before and lived it in Sudan, where two dictators fueled the war through conservative supporter, similar to the insurrection at the Capitol. We must learn from violent histories, both abroad and within our nation. We cannot allow insurrectionists to escape consequences. For our history, you can clap, you can clap. History only showed us that they will keep trying until they succeed. It's disheartening to me to witness the erosion of rights. We are heading backward faster than we think. Banning book, downplaying slavery, rewriting and repeating histories is a dangerous path. The reversal of Roe v. Wade and civil rights law indicating regression that jeopardize not only women autonomy and LGBTQ plus right, but also our basic needs. The role of a congressman and a congresswoman extend beyond mere representation. It is about upholding the ideals that form the backbone of our nation. Our democracy, we hear it all the time, it's at a pivotal moment. And our choices in this election will shape our future. So this debate is not just about choosing one of those representatives, but it's about safeguarding the essence of our democracy. So let's shape future where our democracy progress, not regress, preserved and strengthening via voting. Without further ado, Rajat.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all this afternoon. Can you hear us? Okay, great. Just want to make sure. We had some sound issues earlier. As Hajir said, I am Rajat Harris. I am chairwoman of the Democratic Party here in Dauphin County. I'm also chair of the South Central PA Regional Caucus for the State Democratic Party. As one of the sponsors for today's 10th Congressional District Forum, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. Today is the first of a series of candidate forums to allow voters to get to know our Democratic candidates before the April 23rd primary. The 10th Congressional District is comprised of all of Dauphin County, as well as parts of Cumberland and York counties. This district is seen as one of the most competitive districts in Pennsylvania, and flipping it would help the Democrats regain control of the U.S. House of Representatives. And we're going to need everyone in this room to help us do that, regardless of which one of the 8 standing behind me win the April primary. I think I'm safe to say, and we all agree, that Scott Perry must go. In a perfect world, he would have been made to resign for his efforts to undermine our democracy, promoting unbelievable conspiracy theories, and working hard to overturn the results of the 2020 election. But yet, here we are. All 8 Democratic candidates who are running to unseat Congressman Scott Perry to become our new representative in the 10th Congressional District is here with us today. This is the first time we will see all candidates side by side in the same location answering the same questions. A couple of rules before we begin. First, please silence your cell phones. Also, if you're holding a sign of a candidate of your choice, please do not block the view of any other audience members. For audience members who have social media websites, this candidate forum is being streamed live on PCN and on the Dauphin County Democratic Committee's Facebook page. Please share the link so others can view that aren't able to be with us today. There are 2 baskets on either side for audience questions. Please place your question, if you have one, in the basket, and it will be given to us to be asked the candidates. And again, thank you for joining us. The candidates will give their opening remarks in alphabetical order. So our first candidate is John Broadhurst.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming out on a Saturday afternoon. An election is an opportunity to ask the why questions. Why is healthcare so expensive? Why have rents gone up in some areas 40 to 50% in recent years? Why do 40 million people in America live in poverty? Why does the administration support a war in Gaza, which has already cost the lives of over 23,000 people? Why? Why? Many Americans, millions probably, are now asking the questions, why even bother to vote? And as candidates, we're going to have to address this question. But as candidates, we also have to address the why question of why run for Congress? I know that many of you here have suffered hardship and loss. You know that life is not fair. So do I. But if suffering has any purpose, it is to remind us of a very simple truth. We're all here for a very short time. And while we're here, we owe it to ourselves to make this little patch of earth, the one we inhabit, a better place. We also owe it to ourselves, in the words of Martin Luther King, to be a force for good. This is why I'm running for Congress, and this is why I'm here today. As a Democrat, we also have to remind voters that, after all, there's a lot of good news. Inflation is coming down. Unemployment is at its lowest level in over half a century. Unions have made tremendous gains in recent years. Manufacturing is absolutely booming. This is all great news. But in a certain way, it really doesn't matter, because elections are not about the past. It's about what comes next, the future. The Democratic Party must always be the party of reform and accountability. If elected, I promise to be a relentless advocate for the working class and middle class. I know working class America pretty well. Apologies.
Thank you. Rick Copeland here with an enthusiastic thank you to our host, the Dauphin County Democrats and Widener University Law School. There are two questions that all voters of this district must answer. Who is the best able to beat Scott Perry, and who is best able to represent all of the citizens of our very diverse district? I am that Democrat. Please see the scorecard. Please see the scorecard in front of you. And we've also got it outside. I'm the best person to defeat Scott Perry because I'm the only candidate today who's won 2 elections as a Democrat in a Republican district. And of course, the 10th is a Republican district. As for representing the 10th, my experience is that of all the people of our district. Nearly 1/3 of our citizens in this district are non-white. I may appear to be your standard white guy, but I'm not. My mother is 100% Mexican-American, and my father's white. I bring a teacher's and an elected school board member's compassion and collaborative skill sets. I taught at West Point, the Army War College, and I still teach at Elizabethtown College. My wife and I own a successful small business, a horse farming business in rural Dickinson Township. The vast majority of our support comes from right here inside the 10th Congressional District, not outside. I am a lifelong Democrat. I'm a Democrat not because my parents told me that's what to do. It's the right thing to do because we take care of people. Together, that's one, oh, it's 50. Okay, got it. Together, we will defend democracy and voting rights, ensure women's reproductive freedom, reduce gun violence and crime, strengthen family health care and financial independence, including rewarding work with a living wage and supporting Social Security, and initiating climate change solutions. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Shemaine Daniels, the council member, as Scott Perry refers to me in his social media. I'm a longtime Harrisburg resident, an attorney, a daughter, a mom, and of course, a councilwoman. Most of you already know me in one capacity or another, whether as a councilwoman advocating for affordable housing, making it easier for small businesses to open, or addressing environmental concerns. As an attorney representing workers, enforcing our civil rights, or walking immigrants through their immigration journey, or as an advocate defending and now fighting for our right to choose. Our stories and shared values have brought many of us in this room together over the years. We're here because we know that no one single person can single-handedly change the trajectory of this district. But it can't change at all if we continue to elect leaders who have no understanding of our daily lives or only share our values during campaign season. My family and I migrated to the United States when I was 13 years old. My mom was able to afford us a modest home, educational opportunities, with one full-time minimum wage job. I went to college, I graduated from law school. My story is the American dream, or at least it used to be. Because of the radical agenda of folks like Scott Perry and politicians like him, those opportunities simply are not a reality for most in 2024. And we aren't just losing educational and economic opportunities, we're losing our rights. In fact, shortly after my daughter was born, we found ourselves in an America that afforded us fewer rights than women had since 1973, or as my students like to remind me, the late 1900s. Today, people like me and you and our democracy itself are under attack by far-right politicians. But together we can fight back, and that's why I'm running for Congress. That's why I'm running for Congress.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Robert Forbes.
Don't start it till I start reading. My name is Bob Forbes. I'm uniquely qualified to be your representative for PA10 congressional seat. I'm a retired Army sergeant. We don't ever see enlisted people running for office, who spent 25 years serving our country in multiple historic units, including the 82nd Airborne Division, hoorah, as well as 10th Mountain Division, to the top. Among my multiple deployments are both wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. I'm a disabled veteran with a disability rating of 100%. My disabilities are directly related to combat. I utilize the VA medical system and facilities for all my health care, understand firsthand the challenges our veterans face every day. I'm an educator in the Harrisburg School District. I teach elementary school, serving some of PA10's most marginalized students and faculty. I'm a recipient of Social Security retirement benefits and live on a fixed income. Making ends meet when prices rise at 2 to 3 times any real cost of living allowance is ridiculous. I have 2 sons in college, so student debt is a big subject in our house every day. Our family has truly benefited from all PA10 has to offer. My final assignment was as the Religious Support NCOIC for the United States Army War College. We utilize DLA Cumberland, Susquehanna, New Cumberland, Carlisle Barracks. Our son plays college at York, plays hockey at York College. My race cars are maintained in Duncannon, Pennsylvania. My wife is on Camp Hill Borough Council. I'm the emergency management coordinator for Camp Hill Borough Council. All right, here we go. PA10 has 700,000+ residents that deserve a representative who walks the walk every day. The same voters we're trying to reach today in this forum soundly rejected outsiders like Oz and McCormick. My constituents have asked me to deliver this group a message. Move here, live here, be our neighbor, but don't ask to be our representative until you really are our neighbor. I'm out.
Our next candidate is William Lilich.
Hi, my name is William Lilich. Sorry, that's okay. I moved here when I was 11. It was 1996. Everybody remembers the blizzard, 20-foot snows up in the parking lots. When I was 18, I enlisted in the Army. I had like wanderlust. I had to get out of here, see the world a little bit. Did a 10-year stint as military policeman. Afterward, I drove truck. I had odd jobs. I really struggled after the Army. And in 2019, I was afforded the VA disability, and that changed my life. It enabled me to sort myself out. And I'm here because almost anybody over here can do this job. I don't want to trivialize what's going on. Scott Perry is an animal and he has to go. But almost anybody on the stage can get rid of him. He's on his way out the door. What I can do differently is I can get people to show up. We need more Democrats. We need less liberal talkers and more Democrat voters. And that means we need younger people. We need people that normally wouldn't be here to show up. And I can bring those people here. This isn't about moving the party left or right or more center. I can push the party forward. And that's why I'm here. I'm good. Thank you.
Can the
Can-
candidate have a seat? The one that gave their opening remarks, can you have a seat? And we will welcome Blake Lynch. Blake Shelton.
I'll take Blake Shelton. Blake Shelton's not my family, but I'll take him for sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Blake Lynch, and I'm a candidate running for Congress. What I wanted to do is I want to bring everyone back to a day that was important for me. And no, I'm not talking about January 6th. I'm talking about March 19th, 2020. It was actually on that day that Governor Wolf ordered the closure to keep all of us safe of all of our non-essential programs and also government entities. In doing so, as being a part of the Harrisburg Borough Police, as the Director of Community Relations, I was in the schools every single day alongside our officers of the Community Policing Unit. And immediately, I thought, what are our kids going to do? Because in doing so, they were receiving, 100% of the students received free and reduced lunch. So they weren't getting breakfast or lunch, and then they would go to an after-school program like a Boys and Girls Club or YMCA, and so they weren't getting dinner. So what we did was, because I served on the board of the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank for the last 6 years, I called the executive director and said, can we do something about this? He said, you have all of our support. Called Commissioner Thomas Carter, who was our police chief. Called Mayor Eric Pappas at the time. So what can we do? They said, let's go. So the very next day, we went Facebook Live and got 60 volunteers together to meet uptown at the Y, and then also on Berry Hill Street in Allison Hill. We packed over 430 bags and boxes and then distributed them across the network throughout the entire city. And we fed our kids. And then we fed them again and again. And every week for the next 18 months. Because that's what leadership is about. It's about doing the work when the cameras aren't on. It's about sacrificing. And we had a collection, and many of you are in this room that were part of those distributions, that we served over 14,000 families, distributed over 2.2 million pounds of food, and also organized vaccine clinics for not just our seniors, but those who are most vulnerable. Our congressional seat is at stake. And we need to make sure that you have an advocate and a fighter for you that understands working families, especially being the product of a single parent household like I was as well. So thank you for all your time.
Before we move on, candidates, please use the microphone. I want to remind you this is being streamed live on PCN, so they need the microphone sound so that those not here can hear you. Our next candidate is Mike O'Brien.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Bob. So my wife, Courtney, and I, we were born and raised here in Pennsylvania. We are proud products of Pennsylvania public schools. We were raised with Pennsylvania values, family, community, saying what you mean and doing what you say. We both took those values with us to the Naval Academy and then for a 20-year career in the Marine Corps. For me, I know you've heard it, I was a Top Gun fighter pilot, flew F-18s, F-35s, did missions overseas, launching off of aircraft carriers into Iraq and Afghanistan. But more so than that, we provided humanitarian relief after the Fukushima nuclear disaster. We rescued a family of 8 Afghanis just one day before the fall of Kabul. And I was a commanding officer of a stealth fighter unit where I was responsible for the health and well-being of over 200 Marines and their families. My wife and I were stationed in Washington, D.C. in 2020. We witnessed the aftermath of the 2020 election from the halls of the Pentagon and about a mile away from the White House. And we saw that lead up. We saw the MAGA hats. We saw the Confederate flags. We saw the American flags. We didn't know what was going to happen. That day, 5 police officers died. 150 were injured. And at the end of that night, Scott Perry still tried to fight to take away my absentee ballot here in Pennsylvania and all of your votes. At that point, it became personal for me. There was no way I could stand idly by anymore and let Donald Trump and Scott Perry attempt to overthrow our democracy under the guise of patriotism. So I made a pledge as soon as I could retire and do something about it and face him head on, I would. In 2023, on September 1st, I retired, launched a campaign 5 days later because it's time to step up and it's time to start a movement to reclaim freedom, to reclaim patriotism, and reclaim the American flag itself in the name of democracy. That's why I'm here and that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Our next candidate, Janelle Stelzner.
Hi, Rajette. Hajir, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation to be here this afternoon. Thank you to the Dauphin County Dems for all the hard work you're doing in creating some pretty nice blue ripples, blue waves in some areas around here. When I drove into Harrisburg in 1986, the city looked a lot different. And to be fair, I looked a lot different. I lived on South Street near the Capitol. There were no fancy restaurants dotting 2nd Street. There were no Harrisburg Senators. There was no Harrisburg Hilton. And in the 38 years since then, I have done stories. It's been my honor and privilege to tell thousands of your stories. There's one story, though, that keeps getting worse, and that is our congressman, Scott Perry. I didn't plan to run for office, but in 2022, I was live on the news set when the Supreme Court handed down the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade. And I had to look out into the camera in my best nonpartisan way, nonpartisan at the time, and tell every woman watching that her rights had been rolled back 50 years. It took a big chunk out of my heart that day. Scott Perry celebrated that decision, and in fact, he wants a nationwide abortion ban. He wants to tell you what to do with your body. That combined with his plotting and scheming to make the deadly insurrection happen on January 6th, I realized I could no longer be the one sitting on the news set telling you about these things. I actually needed to do something about it. So I gave up the job I love because I think defeating Scott Perry is essential for protecting our freedoms, protecting our democracy. And I believe the relationships I've forged with tens of thousands of you, many in the room here today, give us our best chance of winning. You know, every Democrat and every Republican representing Pennsylvania in Congress voted to keep our government open over the past couple of months, except Scott Perry. Every Democrat and every Republican in PA voted to protect firefighters from deadly chemicals, except Scott Perry. Every Democrat and every Republican voted to reduce homelessness among our nation's military veterans, except Scott Perry. Does that mean done or 30 seconds? Done. I very much look forward to the next 2 hours and talking more about this. Thank you.
You will all get a chance to talk and make it clear for everyone here, but make sure you be mindful of the time so your other can hear. Okay, so the first, we received a lot of questions here. The first question, what are your highest priorities for the 10th district and the country? Let's start with Janelle.
Okay, last and first. My highest priority is, again, I'd like to work for women's rights. I want to work for voting rights. We've seen what Scott Perry thinks about that. Is this on? Just hold it up?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to work for women's rights. Talked a little bit about that. Like to work for voting rights, all the way across the board, including not overturning your vote, protecting poll workers, making sure everybody has the access they need so that every voice is heard. I can take your criticisms and your issues to the halls of Congress, and you can be heard. I will also be working for civil rights and for workers' rights. We need those good-paying jobs that support our families, and there are some great ways to get them. I look forward to talking about that. I also want to make sure we are safe, we are healthy, we are well-educated, and we have those good-paying jobs. Thank you.
Test. Is this working? No.
Turn it the other way.
Test.
You
Pass.
can,
There
you
we
can
go.
press the button. Yeah.
Hey, so for me, all right. I don't trust these things. We yell as Marines, and that's what I'm used to. But for me, I look at everything through the lens of freedom. Okay, and I'm not talking about Freedom Caucus freedom or Scott Perry freedom. To me, it's real freedom, and what that means, that's the freedom from having to live paycheck to paycheck, to have the ability for our children to have a better life than our own in a sustainable environment. It's the freedom to exercise the right to an abortion, and to have the government and Scott Perry stay out of it. It's the freedom to feel safe in your communities and schools, and to feel safe from gun violence and crime. And last but not least, it's political freedom, which is here in Pennsylvania, not having our votes thrown out based on a web of lies. That's what I stand for.
Thank you.
Check. All right, there we go. All right. Can I have the question repeated, please?
What are your highest priorities for the 10th district and the country?
Absolutely. Highest priorities for our campaign, of course, as I mentioned in the outset, is not only defending democracy, but also advocating for our working families. See, I grew up here, was raised in Steelton, and have never left the district. I went to college at Messiah. I live in Lower Paxton, and my kids attend Central Dauphin schools. I graduated right here in Susquehanna Township with my wife, Brittany, and we've been together ever since our senior year. So when we talk about working families, understanding the issues that, milk is too expensive, and so is the second mortgage that we call daycare. So I have a 4-year-old, and we're talking about over $1,300 a month. And so when you want the next generation to step up, you need to make sure that you have those tax credits, and then also exactly what Senator Casey is advocating for. So we'll ensure that we move forward with working families and everything that we need there. When we go to the next generation, we're talking about our seniors and advocating for access to ensure that they receive what they need from the VA. And then also, again, as my 94-year-old grandmother receives all the health care that she's supposed to. And so again, understanding what our seniors need at Hoy Towers in Steelton, or again, down in the retirement villages in York, I will continue to be an advocate for everyday families who drive 83, get their car damaged by the potholes like I do.
What are your highest priorities for the 10th district and the country?
Is this working? Okay, great.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. Most people work too much for too little. They don't make enough money. They can't pay their bills. And if they can't pay their bills, it's just barely. Nobody's getting ahead. I'm not going to say nobody. There are plenty of people getting ahead. But none of that matters if we don't get more Democrats elected. Like, it's a really big issue. We can come up with policy all day over here, and none of it's going to happen if we don't have more Democrats in Congress and the school boards, local governments, state governments, across the board. None of it matters if we don't get them elected. That's it.
Thank you.
Uh,
Robert?
Me now.
Yes, we hear.
Okay. All right. Look, this is a pretty easy one, right? We're going to go to Washington. We're going to do everything we can to codify voting rights, women's reproductive rights. These are no-brainers. The people I'm going to go to work for are the little tiny people that I see every day that are marginalized in inner city schools, in York, in Harrisburg. The other people that I'm going to really, really advocate for is our veterans. When I was up at the Lebanon VA hospital when I got my hip replaced, I saw a 75-year-old veteran get out of a lift. He had to pay to go to the hospital, right? And look, everybody says the same thing all the time. Thank you for your service. And I say, thank you for paying me, because it was really good. We had a lot of 4-day weekends. Germany was cool. But we have got to take care of the most marginalized people. If we send silver spoons into this seat, they're just going to do what they do. It's got to be a working guy that does this. That's it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so my top priorities are first, comprehensive reproductive rights, from a woman's ability to choose to her right to not die unnecessarily while delivering her babies. Comprehensive immigration reform, because we need a workforce for both agriculture and manufacturing in this district, so those jobs and those businesses do not have to close. And as a council member, being able to unleash the power and potential of our undocumented populations throughout the district who can contribute and help us through our crisis that we're going through now. And finally, if you're from the district and already struggled through those floods these last few days, infrastructure, which also ties in with our environmental needs. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Testing, very good. So number one, I want to thank everybody for being here. This is a beautiful example of democracy in action, and that is my highest priority, but also to help everybody in this room and everybody throughout our district. I already outlined, I encourage you to take a good look at our card. We put a lot of time, effort, and energy into this, and also into our website. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you, if you look at all the websites for all the candidates, and I encourage you to do that, we have the most comprehensive website with regard to specific policy issues. And I could maybe jump in, and we'll see how much time I've got. Reducing gun violence and crime. Please take a close look at that. I'm making a very strong stand on all those things. So I already mentioned it. Defend democracy, ensure women's reproductive freedom, reduce gun violence and crime, strengthen family health care and financial independence, to include ensuring that Social Security is not destroyed by people like Scott Perry, initiating climate change. So I want to say, let me go back to democracy, because this is extraordinarily important. I've still got 30 seconds. So several of us, and I know when I was 18 years old, I raised my hand for the first time and said to the government of the United States, use me as you will. I am taking an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States on behalf of everyone in this room. So there is nothing more important than ensuring that we have democracy. Again, thank you, excuse me, thank you for being here, for participating. It's not up to me, it's all up to all of us to ensure our democracy persists.
Thank you. John. What are your highest priorities for the 10th district and the country?
I think the highest priorities for everyone here has to be, first of all, to address the causes of MAGA, the causes of extremism, because getting rid of Scott Perry is just the first step. But unless we address the underlying causes, we'll be dealing with MAGA again and again and again. MAGA has always existed in American political history. And what are these causes? Today, one of the major causes is extreme economic inequality. The American middle class is being squeezed again and again. It's never ending. This causes anxiety, frustration, anger, and hate. Another cause is militarism, never-ending war. From 2003 until 2023, we've had 20 years of disastrous military interventions. Iraq was a complete failure. Afghanistan was a complete failure, and both of those wars were based on lies, propaganda, and the complicity of elites, Democratic elites, Republican elites, and elites in the military. Everyone knows this, and this is one of the reasons, one of the things that Donald Trump pointed out in 2016. So we have to address this. I do not want to have another 20 years of needless, destructive war. The other thing we have to address is corruption, and I'll address this particularly through campaign finance reform. Money dominates American politics, and we all know it. Money will always be the corrupting influence in American politics. It will always be the number one issue, because you cannot address healthcare, you cannot address educational debt or any other issue without first addressing that.
Next question was frequent. We received a lot of this. As you all know, the economy is the top issue for many voters, and many are in a bad mood about it. Polls continue to show Americans are pessimistic about the state of the economy despite strong signs of solid growth, low unemployment, and declining inflation. But food prices and mortgage rental rates remain higher than people would like. With this in mind, what is the best indication of economic health? Is it the stock market? Is it the unemployment rate? Is it income, etc.? And why? And what specific policy or policies will you support and promote to help Americans who feel they are living paycheck to paycheck?
Quick
Let's start with
announcement.
let's
You
start
can
with
leave
Mike.
the mic here. They just let us know you don't need to pick up the mic.
Let's start with Mike, please. With that.
Honestly, the best economic indicator is how you feel and how you're doing in your own family and on your own kitchen table. And I know that right now, what we have, there's corporate profiteering that really has reduced wages to the level that they can't keep up with inflation. So for me, what I'm going to focus on, my economic agenda, it honestly starts with workers' power. We've lost a lot of that. We started to lose that in the 1980s when the power of unions, when right-to-work states became prevalent and they took away the power to collective bargain. So what we need to do is support our unions. And I'm happy to say that I have the first two unions endorsements of the race, the SMART union, sheet metal, air rail transportation, and then the iron workers as well. Because I am a staunch supporter of unions. That's the best tool that we have in democracy to fight corporate greed. Secondly, antitrust legislation. We have to break up some of these monopolies and encourage competition. And lastly, I'll say the tax code. We have to take a hard look at, I'll tell you, in Pennsylvania, we are the fourth most regressive tax state that exists in the nation. And I know that's state level politics, but from the federal level, what I would do to help economics, is tax wealth, not work. So that's the estate tax. That's also increasing child care tax credits. It's earned income tax credit as well. Child tax credit itself, all of those things from the federal level, that's what we can affect.
Thank you.
Could you hear Mike? Did you hear him? Yeah. Okay, all right, just making sure. I'll get it back up. All right. I think I continue to hammer this home because, again, having a working family, and even despite what it says on your paycheck, who feels that they're doing better? No one does. And so similar to what Mike had said, but also, again, we need to measure by the wages in which are increased. We need to go by collective bargaining. I'm not sure about everyone up here on the table because I didn't do much oppo research with regards to this, but I believe I'm the only person who's actually been a part of a union in Pennsylvania. And so understanding what that means and understanding prevailing wage with regards to our infrastructure projects and our next generation is coming up, I think that's extremely important. When we talk about the economic health, of what is left in your paycheck, a lot of people, over 80%, it continues to be polled, do not have more than $1,000 in their savings account. They're not ready for the tire blowout. Again, because if Scott Perry was doing his job, then we would have safer streets and infrastructure funding taken care of for not only our first responders, but our local municipalities. That's what we're going to do. We need to be on the ground, understanding the relationships, and considering that I've been here, again, all my life, we have those relationships at the county level, at the municipal level, and also the grassroots level of those who are supporting our campaign. So we'll continue to listen to everyone as we continue to go along this campaign, and we'll continue to understand, again, what is important to you. How do you feel? Because, again, I have family that are cutting their drugs to make sure that they're trying to expand out what they need with regards to our seniors. So that's what we'll continue to do, is listen and advocate. Thank you.
The indicator of economic health, I would say, would be the credit card debt. When people don't have money and they still have to eat. I'm gonna pick it up. Yeah, pick it up. I'm gonna pick it up. So I was saying the credit card debt is your indicator of economic health. I don't know. How about there we go. All right, sorry, thank you. Okay. So the indicator of economic health would be the credit card debt. People have to eat. And when they can't eat, when they can't afford the food, they're still gonna get it. They're gonna get a credit card and they're still gonna go buy food because they have to. How about now? Good? What is going like what I'm
Gotta let her rip, kid.
let her in a rip. All right. So where was I? What are we gonna do about it? People, like I said, most people work too much for too little. We have to increase the minimum wage. Pennsylvania's been stagnant at $7.25 for 15 years, something like that. It's unsustainable how little people make. I'm on VA disability. I make $43,000 a year. My girlfriend makes $18 an hour. So we come out to about $70,000 a year. I don't know how people that make less are doing it right now, except for the answer just might be that they're not. They're just not making it right. People got to get paid more. It's just that simple. So raising the minimum wage, raising corporate income tax will force employers to pay their employees and to reinvest in their companies because they're not going to want to give it to the government. It's a very simple solution. The people with the money need to get taxed. Thank you.
Could you read the question one more time, mate?
The basis of the question. What is the economic indicator? Is it the stock market? Is it unemployment rate? Is it income, etc.? And what specific policies would you support to help Americans who feel as though they're living paycheck to paycheck?
I'm going to give you an awesome indicator, economic indicator for PA10. York City, York County, highest. What do they call it when they kick you out of your apartment? Highest eviction. Sorry, highest eviction rate in the United States in PA10. Highest eviction rate. What's going on? Silver spoon landlords. What are they doing? We saw the same thing in our own Camp Hill. They let it run down. They get it condemned, or when somebody misses a payment, they kick them out on the street. Number one thing is to make sure someone has a home. 6 of my kids in first grade last year, 6 of them, their mothers lived in the battered shelter at the YWCA in Harrisburg. If we send someone down there that has never embraced the suck, and I'm sorry to say it like that, somebody like my wife and I, when my little guy's up there, he's 21 now, we were on WIC when I was a sergeant. WIC, okay? We're good with that because we like cereal and we like that wax paper in between the cheese. All right? But I'm telling you, send a silver spoon down there and they're just going to be asleep at the wheel till they start sending you texts for money. That's it.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay, so I think those indicators are aggregate, and as income inequality grows in the country, aggregate numbers don't really give us accurate information about how we're doing. For me, a good marker of how people are doing is what they're spending on leisure, because people spend on leisure only after they've paid all of their other bills. And we've seen how leisure activities have been closing, they've been coming to an end, et cetera, et cetera. So the things I would do to address our economic situation is obviously subsidize childcare, increase minimum wage, prevent corporate gouging. And I do have to address the fact that the Republicans in Congress right now, by driving us constantly to shutdowns, by not giving us a Congress that works, are affecting our credit rating, which means that everything we do as government is costlier and costlier. So if we don't deal with the extremism on the far right, we're going to continue to also experience extreme economic hardship.
Thank you.
All right, I teach economics for a living, and I love this question. I really appreciate it, but I'm going to take a different approach. I know there are lots of military and political historians in the room. I'm going to take a line from Robert F. Kennedy Sr., not Jr., and I don't remember all of it, but he gave a fabulous speech in Kansas one time, and he said, essentially, GDP is an inadequate measure of the goodness and the happiness of our people because it's all about quality of life. It's all about community. It's all about education. It's all about the quality of our marriages. That's my best rendition off the top of my head. So that's important, okay? It's very important. Those type of things that you can't quantify quite so easily. So if I had to quantify something, I will answer the question and say, let's take a different approach. Let's not do GDP. Let's not do per capita income. Let's look at the number of people that are actually earning a living wage and aggregate that across our communities. Because we all recognize that we do not have a number of people in our communities are not making a living wage. So I'm going to go ahead and very quickly tell you a number of things that I think we need to do to fix this. We always should invest in our children and our people, education, training. I love everything about thinking about universal pre-K, thinking about a $15 minimum wage just as a starting point. I will vote for that. I will advocate for that. I'm doing so right now. We want to help make all of our people financially independent. Thank you.
Testing. Okay. I lived in China for about 12 years. And at the time, there was an economic indicator that all economists use called PPP, Purchasing Power Parity, where you take a basket of products and services that consumers need to live well in any country in the world, and you compare them. And one of the interesting things you see is that the United States has been declining over the past 30 years in this metric. And so that means that you need less money to live comfortably in Norway, in France, in Germany, in Italy, and in China. And there are three reasons for this. There are three categories, and everyone's mentioned them to some extent. The first is housing. We don't have a housing market. A market means you have relative balance between supply and demand. We don't have that. We need at least 6 million new units. And as a result, inflation in housing is rampant. The second category is healthcare. Everyone in America, whether they have good insurance or not, knows that they are a banana peel away from disaster. No one trusts their health insurance provider. No one. The third category is the cycle of debt. Debt which piles up through sometimes through reckless behavior, but very often because you have to help a senior or family member afford health care, or a nephew or a child afford education. So we impose these taxes on American citizens: housing, education, and healthcare. And we have to address them all. And until we do, we're not going to make any progress at all.
Let me just start by saying I'd like to see Congress live on the minimum wage. Yeah. I think that's a really good place to start. I said I'd like to see Congress try to live on the minimum wage. The chasm between the haves and the have-nots is baked into our corporate mindset in America. If you're the one who wants a tax break for your private jet, I'm probably not the right candidate for you. I'm looking to help the middle class, and I'm looking to help the most vulnerable among us. And those who have so many resources at their disposal need to start paying their fair share. We need the chasm to not be so deep. It's always been there, but this is really ridiculous, and it's getting nothing but worse. We need tax reform. We need them to pay their fair share. We need to, the healthcare system. Let me tell you a story. Back in the 90s, it did a story on two sisters. They were both, you talked about the healthcare system. They were both struggling with cancer. They lived in a mobile home in York County. They were both trying valiantly to take care of the other one while they were so sick. They were trying to deal with a broken healthcare system. They were so grateful that our TV station came and shone a bright light on their issue. They were so grateful. One of the sisters died shortly thereafter. The other one wrote to me until her death, just filled with gratitude that somebody even paid attention. And nobody should ever feel like that in the 10th district, in Pennsylvania, in America. And I'd like to work to help all of us.
Thank you.
I have two questions here, and they're similar. So the first part would be, how long have you been a registered Democrat? And the second part, if you don't win the primary, will you support the Democratic nominee? We'll start with John. Yes. We have to wait for them to.
Yeah, I've always been a registered Democrat. And I started my political career at the age of 10 when I wrote a letter to Jimmy Carter, who was running for the presidency. I invited him to my house in Ridley Park, Pennsylvania, to spend the night during the campaign. Now, I'm one of 11 children in an Irish Catholic family, and we had two grandmothers living on the third floor. So there was not a lot of room, but that was the first campaign that I became very interested in. So I've always been a Democrat, but I would also say that I've been a very frustrated Democrat over the years, because I've seen the political landscape of the United States shift dramatically. Certainly started under Reagan, but you could even argue it started under President Carter himself. I think we have the 8-year term of Bill Clinton was an extension of the neoliberal economic policies of George Bush and Ronald Reagan. That only started to be reassessed under President Obama, and I think he deserves credit for that. But the Democratic Party has an identity crisis. We have to decide what type of party we're going to be and what type of Americans we're going to represent.
Please repeat the second question.
Okay, so while he's getting you, if you don't win the primary,
Right.
will you support the Democratic nominee? If yes, how?
Thank you very much. So the first question, as I recall, is how long have I been a Democrat? As long as I can remember. Even before I was able to register, I certainly registered when I was 18 years old. But I did grow up in a Democratic household. I know I mentioned earlier that I'm a Democrat because it's the right thing to do to help people, to take care of people. And I'm willing to bet most of the people in this room absolutely agree with that. So I've been a Democrat, registered Democrat, since I was 18 years old. I voted, just like other folks here on the panel, while overseas, I didn't vote while I was in combat. But bottom line is I voted throughout my entire life. And yes, I generally picked the Democrat. I'm planning on doing so again this time. I'm going to vote for President Joe Biden because we desperately need to have Joe Biden as our president. Thank you. That's for Joe Biden. That's not for me. We can go on and on about all the things that we're doing. So, and will I support the Democrat that wins this election for the primary? Absolutely. I've done that unequivocally before. I will absolutely support, because it is imperative that Scott Perry be defeated, or if he's in office like he should have been long ago in the next few weeks, then whoever they put up, who's absolutely, they are going to be, and Scott Perry aids and abets the worst president in the history of the United States, Donald John Trump. We must defeat both.
I am an immigrant, so I was not eligible to vote until I was 22 years old. And when I registered to vote at that age, I registered as a Democrat. But I'm someone whose values has always been consistently the same. I volunteered for Democratic candidates before I was eligible to run, and I volunteered for Democratic candidates after I was eligible to vote for Democrats. So I think what we need more are Democrats who not only talk the Democratic talk, but Democrats who walk the Democratic walk. Thank you.
I've been a Democrat since 1978. I think I got it. I think I'm the winner on that one, right? I have not written any letters to Jimmy Carter or any other president, I don't think. When we talk about supporting the next candidate, it is easy to stand here and go, yeah, I got your back, mate, I got you, blah, 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 blah. It's easy to do. The trick is bringing us all together, right? That's going to be the trick, right? If you're going to ask me now to endorse somebody, we didn't even kick this thing off yet, I think it's a little silly to ask that. People are going to look the other way if you don't unequivocally say, oh, yeah, I'm going to do it. Of course, we need to defeat Scott Perry, right? But you better be ready for Scott Perry. It better be the right person, because this joker's got between $3 and $10 million and some of the best attorneys the RNC has ever produced. You understand what I'm saying? Okay? 30 seconds. I like it. All right? So rather than endorse someone, let's see as we go through this, and then maybe ask the question in a few weeks. Cool?
You're working this time? Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. So I registered in 2016 when Trump ran, because I saw Trump ran and no, like, come on, no. What do you want anyway? Whatever. So yeah, about 10 years, 8 years. Whether or not I'll support the primary candidate, yeah, I'm with Bob over here. Like it depends. I'm not a loyalty pledge guy. Like, we'll see what happens. Probably. I'm gonna say probably, more than likely. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
To go backwards, yes, I'm going to support the candidate that's selected by all of you to defeat Scott Perry. Because that's how we come together as Democrats. Because in all of our literature, you'll see, and even underneath my name is a bridge that builds all of us together. So all my job, all of the jobs I've had in my careers have always been about bringing people together. So the biggest thing for me is doing just that. Have I been a lifelong Democrat? I've been a registered Democrat since I was 18. I voted in every election since then. And when I was 26, I changed parties because, like a lot of people, I was frustrated. I believe that John made a comment as well. And I did not support the primary when I was 26. But immediately when I saw that the party was going crazy with regards to Donald Trump, I switched immediately back and voted for Hillary Clinton. I said, but that was something where, again, I am a lifelong centrist moderate. I grew up in low-income housing, raised by a single mom. I understand what it's like to have no money in the bank and then also to be blessed with an amazing position and a beautiful career. I've gone to great schools. So, and always being here in the district, that has been afforded. So like many who have been frustrated, I have been as well, as we continue to work on our identity. But what you need is someone who knows the issues, and then again, who has the relationships to be able to work together to bring people together to make those things happen.
So for me, the Democratic Party that I grew up with here in Pennsylvania, that was the party of the working class, the party of the middle class. And at some point we got away from that, I think, over the last couple of decades. Now we're seen as the party of elites. I don't know how accurate that is anymore. I mean, you look at us right here, we are the Democratic Party. And I think we need to continue to communicate that we, middle class, is the backbone of America. Okay. And I'll just say that for me, that's what I saw growing up. I did register as a Democrat when I was 18, went off to the military for 24 years. At some point in there, I think after 04 or so, I registered as an independent because that's what I felt my duty was as a military officer, to remain independent. But I'll tell you, before the 2016 election, I couldn't tell you when exactly, but when Donald Trump was on the ballot, it was very clear that back then democracy was at stake. And so I took action to re-register as a Democrat, because you need to vote here in the primary in Pennsylvania. We can't have this closed primary system anymore. So for me, re-registered and have been a Democrat ever since. And I'll just tell you, in terms of supporting the candidate who comes out of this race, absolutely. This was the first time in my life I've been legally allowed to support candidates in the 2023 municipal elections. So knock doors for Gene Fauci, for Justin Douglas, for the Derry Township Dems, for the Central York School Board. That was an amazing thing to be a part of. Justin won by 42 on the night of the election. In Central York, you guys crushed it down there. And so that's something that absolutely I'm going to do for any one of these candidates right here.
I registered in the party my parents were in, like many of you might have done, before I really knew what the political landscape was about, and that was Republican. That's not really the Republican Party like Republicans are today, but that's another story. We'll say I had a job for the past nearly 40 years that required me to be absolutely nonpartisan. So it was not something that I gave a great deal of thought to. I have voted Democratically for years. The piece of paper might have said R, but my ballot always said D. So I am a solidly reliable, I voted for Governor Casey, not just Senator Casey this time, but in the Wayback Machine here. So that's not an issue. And I will say what is an issue is anybody who doesn't support our Democratic candidate going forward after the primary. This is not, this is bigger than you and me. This is about democracy. And we need the Democrat to get in there and take Scott Perry out. I have already pledged to everybody who I've met on this, it's not really a stage, but at this table, that if you're the one at the end of the primary, I will not only support you financially, which is very important, but I will also do whatever I can to get you elected.
So if you're looking at this, all those questions about our stance with Gaza and Israel, I am not going to read it all.
And I'm not on. One thing I forgot to say is when I registered a little over a year ago to become a Democrat, it took about 1:30 on the internet. So anybody who's teetering or thinking about it, if you have friends, it's easy. The coat fits. Do it.
Okay. Reject.
We just got a question in. Where do you live now, and how long have you lived in the 10th Congressional District for which you are running?
There we go.
Let's start with William.
I live in Camp Hill.
Sorry, William.
Good. Okay, great. I live in Camp Hill. I rent. So I've lived in Camp Hill for about 2.5 years now. I lived in Lemoyne right before that. I lived in Camp Hill again. I lived in Mechanicsburg. When I got out of the Army in 2012, I moved back here. They call Mechanicsburg the black hole. It'll just suck you right back in. So yeah, I've been here pretty much since 2012. Not at a solid location, but in this district for sure.
All right, thank you. Robert?
We will. We are going to ask when it's my turn, okay? We're not ignoring any question. We're just trying to file them.
Yeah,
in
Robert,
order,
can you
okay?
please answer?
Yes.
Yeah, I live in, I live in Camp Hill.
Robert,
Yes.
got it.
All right, I live in Camp Hill. I lived in Camp Hill since I moved from Boiling Springs. I moved to Boiling Springs from Seoul, Korea. So I've been in Camp Hill for a little over 11 years. The only time we weren't in Camp Hill was when my entire family was overseas in Germany, and we maintained our house in Camp Hill. What was the other? Is there any other part of it?
No, that's it.
That's it.
Thanks.
That's a quick one because we have a longer one.
Shemaine?
Yes, I've lived in Harrisburg for 18 years, at my current address for 17, and I'm in the 100-year flood zone. But as we know, recently we've been getting a lot more floods in this district. So, so that's the extent of where I've been. Harrisburg by the governor's mansion.
So I'm going to ask everybody to take a look at your card again. It says right there, 15-year resident of PA 10th District. And I will highlight that my wife and I moved to beautiful Carlisle back in 2007 when my brilliant, and I do mean that seriously, my brilliant wife was going to the U.S. Army War College. I'd already retired at that point and done other things. But we now own and operate a horse farm. We are rural Pennsylvania. And I'll tell you, I go out there and do horse farm chores. You can imagine what that means. It's all good. It's all good. But bottom line is, I want you to understand, because some people may think, oh, goodness, he's a horse farmer and he's got all kinds of money. No, my wife and I are both originally very middle class, both West Point graduates, both have earned and done everything we can to ensure that we keep in touch with everyone, but we're living the American dream. And I believe everyone has their own unique vision of that dream. And I believe everyone should have the opportunity to live that dream. So thank you very much for an excellent question. I think we intend to live there forever. So thank you very much.
Yes, my mother had the misfortune of giving birth to me in Ridley Park, Pennsylvania, which is in Delaware County outside of Philadelphia. So I'm not going to apologize for that. My family is from Pennsylvania. My roots are here, and those roots stretch from Carbon County, the Poconos, down to Philadelphia, Greater Philadelphia, out to Pittsburgh. I'd also note that, or just remind you that there was another American who served this district. It wasn't called the 10th, but it served South Central Pennsylvania with distinction, who was also not from Pennsylvania. His name was Thaddeus Stevens, one of the greatest representatives we ever had, and one of the authors of the 13th Amendment. So I would not criticize someone from not being from here. In fact, I would congratulate them. And I would extend congratulations to Mike here. Chanel, although she tried to give everyone a prep course on how to register as a Democrat, I don't think that's necessary for people in this room. But I would have gone to Oklahoma. I would have gone to Wyoming. I would have even gone to Florida if I had an opportunity. But instead, I decided to come here, and I live in New Cumberland.
In the district, even though you're not from the district. That's your answer then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have,
Janelle?
I know. Here we go. I have lived and worked in this district for most of the past 40 years. I had 4 houses in Dauphin County, 3 of them in Harrisburg, 1 in Susquehanna Township, by the longest stone arch bridge in the world down by Fort Hunter. When I married a Harrisburg attorney, I first lived in New Cumberland, and then we had a beautiful house in Camp Hill for a while. I currently live a few miles over the district line, but I would match my knowledge of this district after having done stories in every far-flung corner. I mean, when the woman from Barrysburg came in earlier and was like, Janelle, yeah, I remember when you were, that kind of thing matters, the relationships that you build over the years. Not only do I know this area and do not need navigation to get around Carlisle or Boiling Springs or Deodate near Hershey or any of that, but, you all know me too. And that's going to make a big difference in this election when we're trying to beat Scott Perry. I would also like to say, I never like to say this, but Rick Copland, you might be uniquely qualified when you talked about the horse farm. I bet some of the duties you do are exactly the qualifications you need for this Congress.
Quick, Janelle. Janelle, I have a quick follow-up question for you. Do you plan on moving into the district since you do not currently live in the district right now?
I look forward to what the future will bring.
Okay.
I'm confused.
Mike.
Does she live in PA10 or not?
No.
Great. Okay, thank you. Got a little confused.
Mike?
All right.
Yes, Mike?
All right. So first of all, I believe in full transparency. So I'm completely open to talking about all this. I grew up in Montgomery County, so a couple counties, 2-3 counties to the east. Went to Cheltenham High School there. My wife, she was born in York County in Hanover and went to New Oxford High School. She was an all-time leading scorer in basketball there and at the Naval Academy. So we've been married for about 18 years now. Started dating her back in 2003. So that's when I started to get extremely familiar with South Central PA, obviously coming back here for all the military leave that we took. So this is the first time in our life where we have the chance to choose where to live. And this is where we choose to raise our kids. And we're extremely excited about doing that, not having to move every couple of years, having built-in babysitters with the grandparents. So to answer your question, I live in Susquehanna Township right now. I'm renting a 1-bedroom apartment until my wife retires from the military in June. And then we're building a house right now in Hampton Township. So we're here to stay, win or lose. We're here to fight with you. And I say we as a family, okay? So we're with you. Thank you.
All right. So, born in Harrisburg, Polyclinic Hospital. Raised in Coldcrest, 928 Wood Street, Steelton, eating Naples pizza. Then moved to Oberlin, 14 years. Tri-Community Elementary, Spadera Junior High School, Central Dauphin East. Then moved to Susquehanna Township. Met my wife. My mom purchased her first home when she was in her 40s, pulled herself up by her bootstraps by PHFA. And we lived on Lucknow Road, 116 Lucknow by the McDonald's. Graduated Susquehanna Township right here where we are with my wife. Then went off to Messiah, lived in Dillsburg. Then after Messiah, lived in Middletown for a decade. Cuppy's Diner, Carnes, everywhere in between. The fiasco of that Amtrak station. Then we purchased our first home and were blessed to do that and moved to Lower Paxton. We literally live 5 minutes to the left. And we're raising our kids in Straywin Farms. That's who you're getting with me. Never left the district, always for the district. My family's here in the district. Thank you.
I am next. We received multiple questions, and I'm going to apologize for everyone if I don't read them exactly how you wrote them, but we can't read all the questions, but they're all want you to speak about Gaza and Israel. I would like to ask all the candidates what their position is on the current Israeli-Gaza war. Would you support a resolution calling for a ceasefire? Would you like, the second part would be, do you support the Palestinian right to self-determination under one state for all? Do you support the Palestinian right? You get the idea. So they wanted to know where you stand when it comes to the current war, ceasefire. Are you going to call for that? Are you going to support your constituent? So let's start with you, John. Or Janelle, whatever.
I'm going to address this just standing up, if you don't mind.
Yes.
And I want to say, first off, I think this issue could cost the Democrats the election, could cost President Biden the election. I think there's a massive gap between what people actually feel and what the press is telling us and what the leadership is doing. I think, one, of course, there must be a ceasefire right now. In fact, it may already be too late. What we're seeing is mass destruction of the Palestinian people. The Gaza Strip is a refugee camp. Everyone in the Gaza Strip is a political refugee. And now they're being killed indiscriminately. We know this. Everyone around the world knows this. Everyone. The United States government is going very slowly on this. President Biden expressed great sympathy and commiseration and solidarity with Israel, as he should have, after the attacks of October 7th. Since, he's expressed concern for the humanitarian crisis that we now see. But it's not enough. It's not enough. Now we run the very real risk of a conflagration in the region. Now we have attacks on Yemen, attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. We have attacks in southern Lebanon. We have had attacks in Syria. This will carry on. This is going to be the inauguration of another 20 years of mass death. The United States cannot tolerate this. I say this could cost Biden the election for many reasons, but in the state of Michigan alone, by some estimates, we have at least 60,000 voters of Arab descent who've already said they are not going to vote the Democratic Party. We also have millions of young Americans, regardless of their ethnicity or origin, who are not going to vote. The Democratic Party has to take a strong stance on this.
Thank you for the excellent question. I want to highlight, I answer this as a combat veteran who's seen the horror of war up close and personal, the blood of an American soldier and the brilliance of American soldiers. I've seen it as a peacekeeper in Bosnia. This is an extraordinarily difficult situation, but I will highlight a few things. Number one, Israel has an absolute right to defend itself. Hamas has no right to destroy Israel. The Palestinian people, on the other hand, have a right to a land of their own. And Israel absolutely has no right to destroy Gaza and civilians. Neither Israel nor Hamas has the right to violate the rules of war. Those rules prohibit both sides from targeting civilians, hospitals, humanitarian aid, and other vital resources needed to protect innocent children and civilians, or even soldiers wounded in battle. I will support Israel and its democracy, but I am ambivalent about the current administration of Benjamin Netanyahu. And I will also tell you that the United States must not abandon Israel, but we must never abandon our commitment to the rules of war. That is the tightrope that President Biden has been walking. I will highlight, and the media missed this, the very first speech he gave, he highlighted that the rules of war should apply and that Israel should follow the rules of war. They have unfortunately violated that. That is unacceptable. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, can you? Okay. So Israel is one of our allies, and we owe our allies our commitment and make sure that they have the right to defend themselves. On October 7th, Hamas and over 8 other terrorist organizations carried out the deadliest assault against Jews since the Holocaust. Our job as Israel's allies is to remind them that we can support them in their anti-terrorism efforts, but we cannot support them in a conventional warfare in a heavily populated civilian and urban center such as Gaza. Because as we see right now, there are many, many atrocities. Of the almost 30,000 people who have died, fewer than 10% are terrorists. And what we know, particularly as Americans, is that when we carried out a conventional war after September 11 in Iraq and Afghanistan to try to target terrorists, we lost. We spent millions and millions of dollars on warfare. We lost the moral ground globally because we violated Geneva Conventions, and we cannot allow Israel to violate the code of conduct that we ourselves have subscribed to. Israel needs to defend itself. It needs to protect itself from those who want to attack it. But we need to make sure that we honor our commitments to humanity, and that's it.
Robert.
You better get the bell ready. Look, I'm not going to stand up and grandstand on the back of 19,000 dead children in Palestine. Okay? Everybody here is telling us what the problem is. How do we solve the problem? A couple guys down. We have 2 Marine Expeditionary Units sitting off the coast of this place where they can't fish because the Israelis tell them they can't fish there. We could take those 2 Marine Expeditionary Units, move them in and out on, what are those things called, Mike? Those things that go in the water. Amphibious. They look really scary. I'm a paratrooper. We can move people in and out. We could send so many of our folks in there to help the IDF and the Palestinians rout out Hamas. And at the same time, put a hospital ship off that coast and start to help these people. This morning when I was watching the news, they're wrapping their dead bodies up in plastic bags. Please, going down this list, don't tell us what's going on. We see it every day. What the hell is the solution? I'm telling you, there you go. Get the bell ready. I'm telling you right now, the solution is the same solution when my family lived in Seoul, Korea, 30 miles from the worst guy in the world for 3 years. You put American heads there, they stop putting bombs in there, we bring order back.
William.
I believe in punching up, and I feel like right now Israel is punching down. They should be punching. Okay, Hamas really messed up. Hamas must be annihilated, but not by carpet bombing cities. That is insane. Imagine, if you will, after 2001, if the United States went to Afghanistan and started carpet bombing Kabul. Any criticism of that would not have been considered anti-Christian, or at least I hope it wouldn't have. So criticism, we need to criticize Israel because they're doing it very badly. They are committing war. cities. And it's got to stop. How do we stop it? I don't agree with putting American boots on ground. Like not in this scenario. Israel has enough of our resources. They can handle it. But they need oversight, and they need to start treating this not like a conventional war, but like a counterinsurgency, which is what it is. And in counterinsurgencies, you don't carpet bomb cities. Thank you.
Thank you. Blake.
Go backwards. Ceasefire now. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we've seen the devastation every single day. Regardless of what media station you watch, whether it's Sky News or Fox News, they're showing the same thing. And that cannot stand. Those are not the principles that we stand on. Israel absolutely had a right to defend itself. However, Hamas and Hezbollah, absolutely not. See, what we did and what we continue to do with our ally partners around the world, and I'll let the military professionals speak more, but we strategically work with allied partners using the intelligence that we have and use strategically elite teams that go in. We took out Osama bin Laden with minimal casualties. We did that. President Obama did that. And so why can we not work with one of our strongest allies in the Middle East to do the same? So Israel absolutely had a right to defend itself because of the atrocity that happened that day. However, bombing innocent hospitals and coming after others, that is unacceptable, and ceasefire should take place at this time.
Thank you. Mike.
There's too much nuance to this discussion to handle it in 90 seconds. Look, I'll tell you, there's two things going on. There's what's going on here in America, and there's what's going on over there. And I'll first handle what's going on here in America. We need to have a conversation with people who disagree with each other, which is okay, which is good. Like, that's what we do, and that's how we get past this as a Democratic Party. We know that we all some of us disagree, and that's okay. And so I just want to acknowledge that and acknowledge the different opinions in the room, which aren't necessarily going to agree with mine. All right, I'm a Jew, okay? I have seen increased levels of anti-Semitism that we haven't seen here since the Holocaust. All right, so that's my perspective, and that's what I'll say. That's the lens with which I view things. And that's not everybody else's lens. Overseas, your lens comes into play there too. And again, my lens, I work directly with the Israeli Air Force. I know people that are flying over there. I've flown in a counterinsurgency before. All right, so I know I could bore you with the details on what's going on. But Israel can't let a tactical victory turn into a strategic defeat. I think that's what we have to take a look at there. And overall, I'll say, I have to say that I staunchly believe in Israel's right to exist and its right to defend itself against Hamas. Okay. We've also grieved. We can all grieve for the innocent civilians that have lost their lives. I have a 10-year-old daughter. I have a 7-year-old son. Look, I see the images that are coming out of there. That's not okay. All right. Again, this is 90 seconds, and again, I'm not done. And so let's cut it off.
Would you agree to ceasefire? We have to answer when someone shouted, I guess.
Would you agree?
Would you agree to a ceasefire?
You're minimizing the nuance by having that conversation.
The resolution in Congress right now. Only 2 people have answered the question.
Okay, the candidate has answered. We must move on to the next candidate, please. Reminder to the audience, please allow the candidates to speak. If you want to speak to them further, you can obviously approach them after the forum.
Please do. I invite this conversation.
I was going to answer the ceasefire question last, but I'd like to answer it first. A ceasefire cannot be unilateral. If you want a ceasefire, Hamas, give the hostages back, including American hostages, and then we can talk. There was a ceasefire October 6th. I will say America is Israel's most staunch ally. It is the only other real democracy there. We stand with them on that. I stand with their right to defend themselves after the October 7th attacks. I stand with their right to decimate the terrorist organization Hamas that does not believe Israel has any right to exist.
defend themselves from 75 years of
Shut up.
No. Please, we would like to hear the
Okay.
candidate's opinion, and you
What I-
have the right to agree or disagree with them respectfully. If you need to speak to the candidates, you can talk to them after this. We are
I
here
will
to
also
hear
say-
from everyone.
I appreciate very much that people are so engaged and care so much, because what is happening in the Middle East right now is beyond heartbreaking. I have a picture of two little children, one little girl on the little boy's back, and they look so scared and so scarred up and so bloody. And I keep it there to remind myself that the United States can be a leader in changing this. I agree that we need to be their most staunch ally, but also we didn't even have a full-time US ambassador to Israel when the attacks happened. That should never happen in such an important part of the world. And also, I would let you all know, if you don't already, that Scott Perry voted to cut $1 billion in funding for Israel about 2 weeks before the attacks, which would have, had it passed, seriously hampered their ability to fight back. I'm sorry, time.
Thank you, Janelle.
We're going to turn to healthcare now. As we all know, there are a lot of healthcare disparities, whether it's age, gender, racial, and more. Are you aware that doctors, specifically specialists, can refuse to treat patients? Only emergency rooms cannot refuse to treat people. What do you view as the government's obligation, if any, to help American workers secure access to health care? If so, why or why not, and how would you pay for it? Who didn't start first yet? Let's start with William. And let me know if you need me to repeat that.
Okay. My girlfriend and I joke that our dog has better health insurance than she does. It's kind of not a joke. My dog has better health insurance than my girlfriend does, because she gets employer provided health care, which I need somebody to explain to me why that's a thing, why your employer gets to pick what doctors you can see and what procedures are covered and how much your deductible is. It's just another unsustainable system. There are plenty of Medicare for All initiatives and single payer programs, that have been presented to Congress, through the Senate, to the president, and I would support almost any one of them, because almost any one of them is better than our current system. Our current system just funnels money to health insurance companies. It doesn't provide care. There's no interest in care because care costs money. We have to get the profit motivation out of our health. That's the biggest thing we can do to fix it. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, thanks. My wife and I were talking about this the other day, because we've been in the military so long. We just kind of go, you're in Germany and we go over to Kaiserslautern, and we go here, we go this, we go to the dentist there, and this and that and whatever. So sometimes we'll be talking to our mates and they're like, I paid this for this, or I paid that for that. We have been immune from this. We really have. I had my left hip replaced in Landstuhl, Germany in 2018. They said it was about $18,000. I had my right hip done this August and it was $76,000. Right? Big difference, right? So my team's back there and we were brainstorming on Thursday night, and some of the things we came up with the cost of healthcare being out of control, employers contributing more. But my wife's big thing every time I say it is, why is your healthcare tied to your job? Why is your healthcare, right? You're welcome, dear. That's getting me a lasagna. Why is your healthcare tied to your job? Got it. We've lived everywhere all over the world. We have states now that are buying pharmaceuticals from Canada. Preventative medicine is really important, right? Most people can't afford to go. So I don't really have a solution for it, but it is certainly something that's high on up on our radar. Thank you.
the healthcare disparity part. I brought up about the healthcare disparities, whether it's age, gender, racial, and more. For example, doctors, specifically specialists, can refuse to treat a patient. Only emergency rooms cannot refuse to treat people. So we have Americans who have healthcare insurance, but are still not receiving the care that they need, depending on what their ailment is.
Thank you. So I'll try to answer this. I obviously support any measure that will allow for every American to have access to healthcare. Healthcare should be a right. But being a resident of Pennsylvania 10, I also know that having health insurance is not enough because we have a shortage of medical professionals. And there are a number of tools out there that can help us encourage more individuals to join the medical professions. College affordability is one of those things, but also we need to make sure that we look at licensing, which is a state issue, but we could partner with states to make sure that medical professionals licensing don't have to become burdensome as they travel from state to state. When it comes to disparities, there are certain number of issues that come up, right? One of them is we have a lot of professionals that tend to object to serving the LGBT community because they're either unfamiliar with their needs or because they have biases. And anyone who is licensed by a state or the federal government should not be allowed to discriminate based on those issues. The other part is the education system, right? When it comes to disparities, a lot of what we find when it comes to quality care is not because people are intentionally discriminating, but because of the education that they've been receiving. We see that particularly so in maternal mortality rates. Even if you have the best health insurance and the best specialists, those biases are built into our education system. So better education, that's it.
All right, thanks for the excellent question. I want to highlight there's nothing more important than the health care of all of our people. And when I say all, it means all of our people. I say that about so many different issues. Thank you very much for the equality question. It seems appropriate to me as we celebrate the brilliance of Martin Luther King Jr. this weekend. And think about what he did at the Lincoln Memorial. We all know what he did. He gave us a vision of a dream, and he reminded us of the promise of America. And that promise is that we are all created equal, but we're not. And we have not yet achieved that dream and that reality that a founder's promise that Lincoln reinforced, and we must do so. So we must absolutely do things like, and I'm advocating right now for expanding the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, to include a public option for all those who choose it. Some call that Medicare for all. I call it, it's about time. Healthcare is a right that should be guaranteed for everyone in our country, regardless of color, creed, LGBTQ status. Everyone should be treated equal. You know, sometimes our market-driven system, the most expensive in the world, which is based on sick care, not health care, the system itself is sick. This isn't working very well, is it? But thank you very much. I'm just going to highlight that President Biden has kept his promise to negotiate payments. Thank you very much.
One of the things that strikes me about this debate is that it highlights the absolute and staggering hypocrisy in America. And what I mean by this is, when someone rich says something true, we take it seriously. When everyone else says the same thing, we kind of dismiss it. And I'll give you an example. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in American history, said that healthcare was a tapeworm on the American economy. And he was right, because it consumes about 17.5% of GDP. In France, it's about 11%. Italy, roughly the same, all across Europe. So we're all being taxed between 6 and 8% extra. And this is a competitive disadvantage for all of our companies, large and small. It's a question to which we already have the answer. And President Obama proposed it when he ran in 2008. He proposed a public option. Call it what you will. But that was one of the reasons why President Obama emerged from the pack, in 2008 because he was proposing what everyone needs, a public option. Unfortunately, he abandoned that before he even took office. And now we simply see a resurgence of the same idea under the banner of Medicaid for all. We know that we have to completely wipe out the private insurance sector for the vast majority of Americans. If we have a public option, who here in this room would rather have a private insurance than a guaranteed public option from the federal government? No one.
My 88-year-old mother is here for 3 months. She flew from Seattle, even though she has serious mobility issues. She wanted to help on my campaign. I would like for her to have the same health care that Congress has. I would like you to have the same health care that Congress has. I would like to have the same health care that Congress has. That is just not the way it goes. Over the next year, healthcare is something, it's a primary thing for us to be healthy. It's a right, if you will. Over the next year, we need to hammer Scott Perry on his record on healthcare. He has repeatedly voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, that gave millions of Pennsylvanians, millions of Americans, insurance, health insurance, some of them for the first time in their lives. It must be expanded, not ever taken away. I'd also like you to know that Scott Perry, though he touts himself as a fiscal conservative, also voted against the government's ability to negotiate prescription drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. And I'd like you to know that he did that while he was taking money from Big Pharma. And that's a mic drop. What has he done over the past 12 years to help any of us struggling with any issue related to healthcare? Bupkis. And that will not be the way I will work for you.
So I'll first say access to affordable healthcare, in my opinion, is a right. So we need to enable that. And I am a fan of expanding the ACA specifically. And the way that we get through this, I talked about antitrust legislation before, like Big Pharma, the amount of monopolies that are over there, like that's what's driving prices high. So we need some antitrust legislation to break those up. I'll also say we need competition with prescription drug prices. Like that's the simple way of doing it. When I lived in Yuma, Arizona, which is on the border of Mexico, there used to be tourism. People would come down just to get across the border, get their prescription drugs. I'll also say that nobody here with this answer is talking about mental health. Okay, as a Marine, as a commanding officer, I deal with all the issues of today's society. So mental health, physical health, childcare, legal stuff, domestic violence. But the thing that kept me up at night wasn't like whether my jet was going to work or how we were going to do in war. It was the mental health of my Marines. The good news is that we had options there, whether it was the chaplain, behavioral health services, the hospital, me as the commanding officer. All right, those options were available to us, and I want to bring that here. I know that right now, Cumberland County specifically is operating under a $3 million deficit for their mental health funding. And I'm sure the other counties are there as well, because this is where everybody's moving to. So it's not, we're not matching the funding proportional to the population here right now. So that's something that I would specifically pay attention to here, is mental health as well.
I like my buddy Mike. I just didn't get the chance to go yet. Mental health's here, so it's okay. It's all good. Best for last. It's fine. Can you hear me? Okay. Use your mic. All right, use the mic. There we go. All right. Yes. Now I'm holding it, so it works. Absolutely. I am for expanding access to healthcare. Understanding so many facets of my life, although I may not have a lot of experience when it comes to the military or anything like that. I worked for the Harrisburg Bureau of Police for 4 years. And working alongside our first responders every single day, imagine going call to call to call to call for 20 years. I was not an officer, but as a civilian being on the calls with them, I watched people die. I've seen babies die. And imagine again, our firefighters running into burning buildings, saving people every day. So when we talk about mental health services, when I watched the first person pass away in front of me, getting hit by a bus, and the fire chief said, Blake, there's nothing that we can do to pull him out. I've seen all these things on TV. Oh, come on, we can do this with straight. He's like, Blake, no. and watch that man scream out and cry out for help. And then again, hearing that for several months. I talked to the chaplain. I received mental health services for that and still occasionally have that. I have no idea what it's like for PTSD with regards to war, but I know that I can speak about my personal experience and then also raising 2 kids. My oldest son has had 3 eye surgeries before he was 4. When we talk about mental health and physical health and access for working families, that costs money. That takes savings that you don't have. And so if you're supposed to contribute to the economy and do all these amazing things, but then life comes, or you become pregnant, or many other things that come into play, that is important to bring down, and that's what you'll have in Congress as an advocate who lives it and understands it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I want to remind everyone that this is the first of many. So if your questions are not being answered, ask again. I compiled 3 questions here in one. It's basically, what are your plans for women's rights, transgender rights, LGBTQ+, and basically preserving women's reproductive health right nationally? And let's start with Rob. He said no.
Please, let's coordinate this.
We're trying to give everyone a chance to start, but if it's hard for you, I can start from, no problem.
Go ahead, sir.
5, Robert.
Could you read the question again, please? Sorry.
What are your plans for protecting rights, starting with women's reproductive health right nationally? What you're going to do to protect transgenders, LGBTQs, and everyone? There's few other part of this question.
Okay, I got it.
You got
All
it.
right, so, being a kid growing up in Philadelphia, I happened to have access to New York TV. And there was this lady named Bella Abzug. I'll never forget her, right? I mean, she was a beast. She was an absolute beast. I was incredibly impressed with her. Where are our Bella Abzugs? I will go to D.C. and don't raise your fist at me back there, madam. That's my wife. I've played hockey with her. Anyway, that's what we all need to be doing, right? Because look, just like we're dudes, and I know, and my wife is tough, and she can take care of herself and karate chop somebody or something, but we're supposed to be looking out for our mates, right? Okay? When I teach in the Harrisburg School District, I have kids that come to school that are one pronoun one day, one pronoun the next. You know what I do? I teach, right? We make sure no one's getting bullied. These are the things that I really focus on. Those folks that are being marginalized. We're marginalizing our wives. We're marginalizing our girlfriends. We're marginalizing our kids. Got it. So I want to be that advocate. The advocate for those folks that are marginalized. And now, with our Supreme Court, it's almost all of us. Thanks.
Thank you.
So this is one of those things I've had to deal with as a council member. As you all know, the city of Harrisburg is one of the few municipalities in the states that allows for protections of members of the LGBT community because of the Human Relations Commission that I helped establish and the ordinance that allows them to enforce those protections. But in addition to that, anti-discrimination provisions, Pennsylvania doesn't have one for the LGBT community. I do have to say that with the LGBT community, as well as with immigrants, Democrats cower when Republicans go on the attack. And as Democrats, we need to be people who have a spine on these issues, not allow the far right to demonize any community, because it's not true. A lot of the stereotypes, a lot of the harms that Republicans talk about when it comes to allowing the trans community to live their authentic lives are not true, they're not real, and they're just distractions so that we don't notice that they're not doing their jobs, and we don't notice that we don't have healthcare, that we don't have jobs that pay well, that we don't have homes that are affordable. And as long as we allow Republicans to demonize any particular group and distract us from the issues that make the quality of life in Pennsylvania a good one, we will continually lose. So we need real Democrats there on November 5th on that ballot.
Very good. Thanks for the excellent question. I'm going to commend Shemaine for a great answer there. That's absolutely, I'm in agreement with that. But I want to highlight, I think the question was also definitively, what are we going to do as in Congress? So I am absolutely going to sponsor and be a strong advocate for legislation to ensure that women and their bodily autonomy is sacred and that their reproductive freedoms are preserved. And I also want to highlight, let's elect Democrats across the United States in greater numbers. And I will be an advocate for, again, I will work hard for a constitutional amendment that, as Mr. Lincoln said, for all time settles the matter and ensures that women's reproductive freedom is guaranteed.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll go back to that with the time remaining, but I do want to highlight absolutely with regard to LGBTQ rights, I empathize. I have a family member that falls into that category. I state again what I said before. Dr. King was brilliant in his assertion that we should all be treated equal. I will take every opportunity in Congress to ensure that human and political rights, and those of the LGBT community, those of every single community in the Pennsylvania 10, are never compromised, and that Americans are welcomed into our communities. I want to go quickly back to the Roe v. Wade decision and say, of course, the Supreme Court in that original decision ensured that reproductive freedom is a fundamental right of privacy, the right to be left alone. And I think I'm about out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you. John?
I think reproductive rights for women is first and foremost an economic and a class issue. And I say this because it's rarely a question of free choice. A woman of means will make the decision freely. A woman without means is in a very, very different situation. And we all know this. It's also a question of the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, in my view, with 3 justices who were appointed by an illegitimate man who lost the popular vote, cannot have any moral authority. This is one of the reasons why we have a crisis of our democracy, because people do not respect the Supreme Court. And this is just one of the instances. We have a Supreme Court which is now taking back rights, taking rights away. And we have to address this. And this is another example of dealing with the cause, not only the consequence. I'd like to end here by saying this is an issue that the Democrats have not really been serious on for years. Democrats had the opportunity, when they had majorities in the House and the Senate, to codify abortion rights, which could not have been overturned, and everyone bounced. Everyone bounced because they were afraid of offending or not getting the vote of suburban, upscale people. This is something, soccer moms, thank you. But this is something you have to address as an economic and an issue of the Supreme Court, illegitimacy.
Okay. Janelle?
First of all, I'm really proud of my colleagues up here because these have all been outstanding answers. They've been thoughtful answers. And I will also add, if men had babies, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. And in that vein, how dare Scott Perry, how dare he celebrate Roe v. Wade being overturned? And the part of the story I didn't tell you when I said I had to look into the camera and tell every woman her rights had been rolled back 50 years, that when I went upstairs after the newscast that day, we have this assignment editor, big brawny guy, tats all over, works out all the time. He was over in the corner with his head bowed. And I asked him what was going on, and he looked up and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, Janelle, my wife was raped. If we hadn't had abortion available to us, our lives would be ruined. And so often we concentrate on the women because it is our rights that are being infringed upon. But sometimes we leave out of the conversation the men who love those women. This is an issue for all of us. And thank you. It's just, I'm sorry that we're having this conversation in 2024. It is obviously healthcare. Guys, when you have something going wrong or you want to change something, you talk to your doc. It should be the same for the women. This is nothing that a politician, I've never been a politician, but it's something I will now get involved in because politicians butted in where they didn't belong. And Scott Perry is chief among them. I would also like to say in terms of our LGBTQ friends, representation is everything. So let's honor and respect who they are and what they've tried. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mike.
So as a commanding officer, the only person who's able to talk about medical issues are the commanding officer himself and then your doctor. There was a day where one of my Marines didn't show up. She was actually one of only 4 qualified Marines to launch aircraft. The reason she didn't show up is because she was scared to have a conversation with me about her desire to have an abortion. She was going through a divorce and didn't know how I would react, regardless of what the laws said. Luckily, we were in California. So she didn't show up for the work that day and then called me. And I told her, like, look, this is a deeply personal decision that is up to you. And whatever you decide, I 100% support you. Obviously, she went through with the procedure, but this all to say that I believe that abortion itself is a deeply personal issue that is up to the woman with her family by her side, with her doctor by her side, and spiritual advisor if she so chooses. There is no room for the government or Scott Perry to be involved. Want to talk very quickly. So LGBTQ, everybody hears this version of the woke military on Fox News and MSNBC. I'll tell you, like, I had a trans Marine in my squadron, and he was one of those other qualified Marines to launch aircraft, one of 4 people. My wife has one who is waiting. He's holding his reenlistment paperwork to see if Trump gets elected again. This all to say, like, that's the criticality of this issue. We have to 100% support anti-discrimination legislation here in Congress, specifically housing, workplace, federal legislation.
Blake.
I think we all agree that protection and representation is extremely important. And I agree to that as well. Being an advocate, prior to this being a full-time candidate for Congress, I was the Senior Vice President and Chief Impact Officer of WICF Public Media, our local NPR and PBS station. So assuring, again, being an advocate for our children and all of our communities to ensure that everything was placed on the air that is reflected in the communities. Having the deep conversations that are important were extremely important to us and, again, our journalists. Then prior to that, being a part of the city of Harrisburg, where Councilwoman Daniels just explained about the protections that have been passed for city council. I was glad to be a part of the Bureau and actually be able to work alongside many who were trans and also who had procedures that were done. I know that, I won't disclose that, that's their business. But my wife and I agree on the same thing. It is between a woman and her doctor. We've had 2 children. I have seen my kids grow. I have seen the pain and the difficulty that happens, and then also the different things with regards to pregnancy. So I have nothing to say, but it's between a woman and her doctor, full stop. I'm a man. I ain't got nothing to do with that. But then also when it comes, absolutely. That's a reality. And you're right. Because, I mean, it's crazy because we can get Viagra. No one wants to talk about that.
You're right, yeah.
Yes. But we continue to then, in the military, but then we continue to fight against a woman's right. That should not be allowed.
Yeah. Amen. William?
I think it's Idaho right now, right? Where Iowa?
Yeah.
Closer? No, not the Caucasus. Idaho. In Idaho, there is a woman that had an ectopic pregnancy, correct me if I'm wrong, and she might die. She might die because she cannot get health care. She cannot get the procedure she needs to save her life because a bunch of dudes said no. A bunch of guys with no medical training, no medical experience said no.
No uterus.
So I think Adam Schiff on Friday introduced legislation, or at least he gave it to Politico. It's pretty expansive. It expands the Supreme Court. We need justices that will, codify and adhere to. We need to revitalize Dobbs. like period. And we need justices to do that. That's not going to happen with the court that we have right now. So this is kind of a two-part question. I hate to cut this part short. Thank you. So I'm going to flip to the other side. Not sure if you guys could tell, but I was a weird kid. And, I'm still kind of a weird kid. So if you're a weird kid, I got your back. Full stop. I got your back.
I'm going to try to squeeze one more question in, then we'll go to closing remarks. So I would ask you to try to keep your answers to 1 minute with this. I'm going to go back to wages real quick. As we all know, there's a wage disparity as well, not only between men and women, but also with people of color, particularly women of color. There are huge wage disparities regardless of their educational level. As we also know, the U.S. Supreme Court last year struck down President Biden's student loan debt forgiveness program, which hurt not just young people, because there's a lot of adults with student loans as well. So I guess my question for you is, because of the wage disparities and because of low wages, what can you do representing the 10th District, which is very diverse, to help with these two issues? Let's start with Shemaine.
Could you repeat the question again? Or shorten that?
There's wage gap disparities between men and women, people of color, and wages are low, and people are graduating school with large student debts. So what can you do as the congressperson for the 10th District to help these individuals?
Thank you so much. I think we absolutely have to increase the minimum wage to begin with, but we also have to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, because the reason employers get to discriminate against women is because right now it is reasonable to discriminate against women. If we make it so that employers have to prove why they have to discriminate against women, it will be harder for there to be a wage gap. We also have historically had a method to pay folks fairly. It's called a comparable worth analysis, which employers refuse to use because it will result in women being paid comparably to their male partners. So I think we need to make sure that the Equal Rights Amendment is ratified and that it's enforced.
Thank you.
All right, a minute or less. Great question. I want to highlight, I agree with Shemaine on this one as well, but I also want to highlight, I already mentioned, and I'm going to reinforce again, $15 minimum wage is a starting point to achieve a living wage, and we should increase that. I'll also say and express support for the Equal Rights Amendment, and if we're not able to do that right away, clearly I support legislation to ensure that everyone in America is treated equally in the workplace. Absolutely, men and women should have fair wages, a living wage, and equal wages. I also want to highlight Scott Perry opposes raising the minimum wage, much less a living wage. He also opposes collective bargaining. I strongly support this basic right that created the post-war middle class, and on and on. So I'm expressing strong support, not only for men and, of course, for women, but also for all working people, that they earn and are able to keep a greater share of the wealth that they make. Thank you very much.
Wage disparity can be addressed first for low-income people by people who work in manual labor or in the service sector through minimum wage. So everyone's already addressed that. We need to increase the minimum wage. But the problem is that Democrats are always looking for what is the minimum and not trying to stretch it. The one area where the federal government has real power, and it can use that power, is through federal contracts. In my view, the federal government should not give any contracts to companies which work against unions, which fight labor rights. 3 seconds, okay. So those are the two basic things. So enforcing labor rights, collective bargaining, and increasing the minimum wage. But the third thing that we'll have to address very soon is the middle class is going to get crushed very soon through artificial intelligence. So people who are now working in service jobs who don't dress like blue-collar people, but actually go to work for Comcast or for Verizon, et cetera, those jobs, millions of these jobs will be outsourced very soon. My time's up, sorry.
Thank you.
I will say one of the things we need to do is fully, equitably fund public education. And for me, that's where it all starts. You get the good education, then you get the good job. Not everybody takes the same tracks. Some like to do tech things. Some like to go on and do, be a college professor or whatever you're going to do, brain surgeon. But everybody needs to reach the 12th grade, the end of the 12th grade graduation. The one thing I didn't hear when the Supreme Court overturned affirmative action, I did not hear. I heard a lot of boo-hooing on both sides. We need it. We don't need it. What I didn't hear one politician say is, how about we shore up our pre-K through 12 educations so that when everybody graduates, they actually are on a level playing field and can do whatever they want after that. Education is a huge component of this. Also, we cannot continue to saddle students with so much debt. We just can't. You got to give somebody, I had student loan debt too. One of the greatest days of my life is when my now ex-husband paid it off on my birthday.
So I think part of the reason for this disparity is the responsibility that falls largely on the shoulders of women when it comes to childcare. Okay, that directly limits their ability to participate in the economy. And so for me, that's why I talked earlier about the childcare tax credit. We need to one, raise that. We need to make it refundable, so that for a lot of these low income jobs or low wage jobs, we can actually give something back to the community and give something back to specifically the women that participate in the workforce there. So for me, education comes into it as well. Universal pre-K, that is a form of childcare with actual teachers, and that is great. So that's one of those things that's not only good for the student, it's good for the family, and then it's good for the workforce as well. So that, to me, I think would significantly improve the prospects out there. And I'll lastly point out, I know I only have about 30 seconds, it goes beyond just wage disparities. There's wealth disparities. Like the average white family has 10 times the wealth of the average black family. The way that happens is intergenerational transfer of wealth. And so the gist of that is housing. So housing, I'm going to talk housing in the city.
Raja, can you just repeat the question back? I want to make sure there's been so many variations of this answer.
The wage disparities.
Right.
Now, talking about the wage disparities, not just between men and women, but also people of color, regardless of your educational achievement. And then I'm tying that into the student loan debt with the Supreme Court striking down the Biden administration student loan debt.
I just wanted to make sure I tried to answer the question directly. It's just different things going on because I'll point back to what's already been done. In my previous role, that's what we did every single year at WITF was comp analysis. Regardless whether you were a woman or you were a man, that was enacted by our CEO. And so that's something that we budgeted and paid for every year, and to ensure that we were closing that gap or ensure everyone was on a level playing field. I was a part of that process. So understanding what that is and to help craft legislation to do so, already did it and continue to do it because that's what I believe. When we talk about women of color, I completely understand it because my mother still hasn't earned over a certain amount that has been respectable in her later years with regards to her job, because I lived it every single day growing up with a single mother because my father passed away of a brain aneurysm. And so she didn't select that. So that is something that she's had to navigate multiple jobs to do. And that's what I'll continue to advocate for everyone. And when we talk about with regards to, I'm missing one more, student loan debt, I went to Messiah College, everyone, where the average yearly tuition was $35,000 a year. And so that is extremely important. And unfortunately, like many of us, we weren't able to get rid of those loans yet. But as we continue to fight towards it, that's what we're going to do.
I'm going to start with the student loan part. I'm going to flip it up here. So there's already a bill on my website to eliminate, at the very least, the interest on student loan debt, which I worked at FIA, and these poor kids, they have no idea what they're signing up for. They're told their whole life that this is what you need to do. You need to take out this debt or you're going to fail at life. So they do, but they don't know what that debt is. They don't know what 8% interest on $100,000 means. They don't know that they're going to pay $300,000 over the course of 30 years. So at the very least, we can get rid of the interest. We can make the payments effective. That's just a start. The other one was the wage disparity. Look, we got a bunch of great answers over here, and I'm not a great artist, but I will steal your answers anyway because they are all fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to do this really nicely. I have one son in Lebanon Valley College. The other one is in York College to be a BSN nurse. So I'm going to ask Janelle Stelson for her ex-husband's phone number. Good, right? Right? Look, we're lucky. My one son goes on my post 9/11 GI Bill benefits, and the other guy is a pretty good athlete. But we all know that the FAFSA is what runs our home, right? Okay, we're already back to the $1,000 payments and blah, 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 blah. The predatory lending is what's got to stop, in my opinion. And what was the other thing real quick? Oh, wage disparity. Just drive up and down 83. You see what's going on. Amazon, right? We'll give you $20 an hour. We'll give you this, whatever. There's a young man here, and I'm going to finish real quick, from Santa Rosa, California, where the cost for community college is what, my friend? What's the cost? What's the cost for community college in Santa Rosa, California? There you go. What the hell is going on around here? I'm done.
I promise you we're not trying to cut you off, and we wish for everyone out there and encourage you to reach out to every and each one of them and learn more about what they stand for. Closing remarks, 1 minute, starting with Janelle.
Okay, first of all, just a little shout out. I've got an awful lot of volunteers, students for Stelson, other folks here. I just want to thank you for your hard work so far, and we're going to have a lot harder work coming, so thank you for that. Thank you, Hajir and Rajette, and the Dauphin County Dems for giving us an opportunity to share our vision for how we defeat Scott Perry moving forward. And thank you also to my colleagues here. Your answers have been great. I feel like we're in good shape with any one of us. So I will just say, I'm not a politician. This is my first time at a debate on this side of the camera. So this is very interesting to me, but I think it is our time. Remember, for those of you who are weary because you've backed the Dems before and we haven't gone all the way, remember, Josh Shapiro won our district by 12 points, a landslide over Doug Mastriano, and he is nothing but Scott Perry light. We can do this. The Cook Report, which is the most well-respected, nonpartisan political handicapper, can I just finish? I promise I'll be short. Political handicapper across the country for congressional seats, just finished a couple of weeks ago moving our district from likely Republican to leans Republican. Thank you to the hard work all of you are doing. And they did it on the strength of my candidacy, calling me the greatest threat that Scott Perry has faced. I promise you, I'm going to work every day for you and to beat Scott Perry.
Mike.
Make no mistake, this primary is all about who can beat Scott Perry. And I firmly believe that I'm the candidate that has the resume, resources, and character traits to do so. And after I'm your congressman, I'm going to defend democracy, defend women's reproductive rights. What am I going to do from the district? I'm going to bring infrastructure money here. We're going to fix the I-83 bridge. We're going to make I-81 safer. We're going to fund redevelopment projects in York and in Harrisburg. We're going to fund mental health and fund education where it is not right now. It's not at the appropriate levels. And so for 20 years, I was a servant leader in the Marine Corps. I spent that time taking care of and fighting for my Marines, fighting for America, and here I'm going to fight for you, the people of Dauphin, Cumberland, and York counties. Thank you.
Blake.
Got to look at the gentleman and make sure I'm cued. So You know, with regards to being here, thank you to everyone who showed up today and packed the room. It's extremely important that, again, we understand what democracy is about and that is what is on the ballot. We have to make sure that you have someone who's proven, who's done the work when the cameras weren't around. When we were doing the work, in the projects and also in the C-suite. Understanding what it's like to have children in our own public schools, understand what it's like to be born in our hospitals, and understand what it's like to drive on our roads. Although Scott Perry's on the Subtransportation Committee, he's the only member to vote against funding for the 83 expansion project. And so when I get to Congress, because my car has been damaged by these potholes, in regards to 83 and driving down 1115, that's what we'll fight for. When we talk about food insecurity and inequities in pay, I understand what that's like because I serve on the boards of the food bank and many other organizations here in the district. When we talk about what has been done, we're doing it. Our volunteers and grassroots organizers are assembled from Carlisle to York to in the city. We talk about relationships with already politicians that are already on in party right now. That's what we're going to do because those relationships are already pre-existing. So you have someone that's proven, tested, and has the relationships there. Thank you.
I'm laconic. That means I'm short-worded. I saw a video the other week. It was a whale dying. You guys know what happens when a whale dies? It died of old age. It was in the ocean. It just sunk down to the abyss. And when that happens, all the bottom feeders come out. And they come out and it booms. There's a whole ecosystem that grows out of this whale. That's what's happening right now. Scott Perry is twitching and falling into the abyss. There's a motion right now to get him kicked off the ballot, and it should pass through the court systems. So anybody up here might not even have to face Scott Perry. I don't want to trivialize like the campaign and what it would take to get rid of him. Don't get me wrong, but anybody here can do it. I got here on $100 and my smile, I guess. And I will show you guys how to do it. I will bring more people here to do it. If you're at home, I will show you how to do this because we need people at home here doing this as well. Thank you.
I think we can tell you were an NCO in the Army, right? Okay. Because it's a sergeant's job to do what? Not go to teas like the officers' wives go to, or not be kowtowed to, or whatever. It's a sergeant's job to get blank done. Okay? PA10, you're doing it again. The shiny object doesn't even live in PA10. Oh boy, this is the one. $20 million y'all wasted on this. From George Scott to Eugene D. Pasquale, to other folks that have been defeated, okay? Stop looking at the same people. Send a sergeant to D.C. to get work done. Oh, thanks, buddy.
I'm going to take a moment to remind you of what we accomplished in 2022 and what our collective task is in 2024. I'm proud of the race I ran in 2022. In 2022, the district was 4% more Republican than it had been in 2020. Scott Perry and Jim Jordan together spent about $3 million to defeat me compared to my $400,000. Previous campaigns had significantly outspent Perry without being able to win. Despite those circumstances, I outperformed all previous Democratic nominees. I started the second race with the 149,000 votes I received in 2022 and knowing Perry's playbook. But this race isn't about one person. It's about all of us in this district. It's about you, your neighbors, your friends, and your family. I want you to think about the hours you will spend knocking on doors, texting, calling, and arguing with friends and family. And I want you to think about which candidate will make that job easier to do. The Democrat you know shares your values, or the one you hope does. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much again for being here. This again is democracy in action. This is beautiful. Let's keep this moving. When Scott Perry is not committing treason, he's probably thinking about his dream candidate to run against in November, someone that he can quite frankly more easily beat, someone who doesn't live in our district, someone who's never voted in a Democratic primary and has no established Democratic base, someone That's a good Bob. No thanks. But has never run for office or won as a Democrat in a Republican district, has never served our country in uniform, has never run a small business, has no deep understanding of foreign relations or economics, does not have the listening facilitation skills of a teacher. In short, I'm all those things. I am Scott Perry's worst nightmare. And that's exactly what makes me the best candidate to defeat him decisively. With your help and your vote, I will defeat him, and I will serve everyone in this room and beyond in Congress. I'm going to end with Robert F. Kennedy Sr., who said, "Some people see things as they are, but I dream things that never were and ask, why not?" We need that kind of thinking again. Thank you.
In January 1964, Lyndon Johnson convened his advisors to his residence. He had not yet moved into the White House. And he asked them to draft his speech for the State of the Nation. And when he came back the next morning, his team had done an all-nighter. And he said, "What do you have for me, boys?" And he said, "Well, Mr. President, we've got to go with the tax cut. We've got to talk about economic development." And they ran through a list of issues that they were advising the president to emphasize as a top priority of the country. And he said, "What about civil rights?" And they said, "Well, you're going to use your political capital, Mr. President." And he said, "What the hell is power for?" This is where we are right now. What the hell is power for? We have to elect someone, a Democrat, who is not going to ask other people for his opinions, does not have to ask the bosses at the administration, what do I think, what do I do? Because we've already done this. We've been through this before. I'll finalize with a final thing. I'm sick of Democrats telling us, as soon as they're in office, reminding us of just how powerless we are. It's about time that Democrats, once they are in office, they use the power they have.
Let's give all 8 of our Democratic candidates a round of applause. And thank you all for joining us.